A strange scene unfolded beneath the falling snow. A wealthy man, calm and composed, was pouring a black trash bag over the head of a homeless man. It was what a veteran and his loyal K-9 partner stumbled upon in the dead of a white, silent night. The rich man turned, his voice polite, almost friendly. "Evening, veteran Cole," he said pleasantly, just reminding a vagrant to respect private property. But as the veteran stepped closer, he froze. The man being humiliated was Evan Grant, a soldier who had once fought by his side. Evan's lips trembled as he whispered, "They told me to stay silent. I saw what I shouldn't have seen." And in that moment, something buried beneath Red Hollow's snow began to stir. A secret that would not stay frozen for long. From that night on, one man's mercy would ignite the fire that exposed everything this town tried so hard to hide. Before we begin, take a deep breath, and if stories like this still move your heart, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. Your support truly means the world to us. Tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your country in the comments below. Let's see how far this story of truth and mercy can travel. The first snow of December had come early to Red Hollow, covering the town in a stillness so deep that even the wind seemed afraid to speak. Street lamps flickered through the storm, and the few shops still open glowed like lonely embers behind fogged glass. Out beyond the town square, an old patrol truck crept along the frozen road, its headlights carving through the white haze like tired eyes searching for something to believe in. Inside sat Raymond Cole, 55, a man built from discipline and quiet endurance. His face was lined by years of service, first in uniform overseas, now under the badge of a small-town sheriff's deputy. Beside him, his partner and only constant companion, Max, a 9-year-old German shepherd, sat tall and steady, his breath misting the air in slow, deliberate rhythm. The old truck rattled with every gust, but neither man nor dog flinched. Both had weathered louder storms. Then something shifted. Through the snow, a flicker of movement, small, deliberate, wrong. Raymond eased off the gas, Max's ears lifted. A shadow appeared beneath the nearest street lamp. 2 figures, one standing, one kneeling. The man above wore a dark overcoat lined with fur, his posture immaculate even in the blizzard. The other, huddled on the ground, was trembling so violently that the snow barely clung to his shoulders. Raymond pulled over, the tires crunching into the ice. The headlights caught the glint of metal. A trash can tipped sideways, and then the truth of it. The man in the fine coat was dumping a black garbage bag over the one on the ground. Empty cartons and papers spilled across the snow like insults. The standing man turned, unhurried, as if caught in nothing worse than inconvenience. His face was smooth, his smile well-practiced. Travis Stanton, heir to the family that built half of Red Hollow. His wealth bought charm, his charm bought silence, and together they had purchased the town's obedience. Raymond stepped out into the storm. Max followed, paws sinking deep into the snow. The cold bit through the veteran's coat, but anger kept him warm. "That's enough," he said, voice low and even. Stanton's smile didn't move. "Evening, Officer Cole," he said pleasantly. "Just reminding a vagrant to respect private property." His words were polished, but his eyes were sharp as glass. Raymond ignored him and knelt beside the man on the ground. The face that looked up through the frost was one he hadn't seen in over a decade. Gaunt, pale but unmistakable. Evan Grant. A brother in arms from another life, once full of laughter and reckless courage, now little more than a shadow of both. His breath came in shallow bursts. His lips cracked and blue. "Evan?" Raymond's voice barely carried over the wind. Evan blinked, recognition flickering like a dying flame. Stanton chuckled softly. "You two know each other?" "Small world. He was trespassing. I simply helped him find the exit." Max stepped forward, growling low in his chest, eyes locked on Stanton. The heir took a polite step back. "Careful," he said smoothly. "That thing might bite." Raymond rose to his full height. "He only bites when he smells rot." The words were quiet, but they cut. Stanton's grin faltered for half a heartbeat before returning, colder. "You'd do well to remember who keeps this town alive, Cole," he said, voice sugar-coated but trembling beneath the surface. Then he turned and disappeared into the storm, his black SUV swallowed by the white. Raymond crouched again, brushing snow from Evan's face. The man's body was trembling uncontrollably, his voice a rasp between coughs. "Ray, they told me to stay silent," he whispered. "I saw what they did." "What who did?" Raymond asked, but Evan's eyes rolled back. He lifted his old comrade into the truck, Max jumping in beside him. The cab filled with the sound of wind and the faint rattle of Evan's breathing. Raymond turned the heater to full, rubbing life into the man's frozen hands. Outside, the storm howled against the glass like an accusation. As the truck rolled toward town, Raymond's thoughts twisted through the past. The missions, the medals, the promises that never held. Evan had been a good man, brave and loyal. To see him like this, humiliated and broken, lit something raw inside him. Max rested his head on Raymond's knee, eyes shifting between the man behind the wheel and the unconscious figure beside him, as if sensing the battle neither could name. Red Hollow appeared through the snow like a ghost of itself. The street lamps burned weakly against the dark, the church cross buried under frost. Raymond slowed near the abandoned gas station to catch his breath, but something made him stop entirely. Fresh tire tracks in the snow, wide and deep, leading the same direction Stanton had gone. He looked back into the rearview mirror. Nothing but white. He drove on, the tires grinding over ice. Evan stirred once, muttering something Raymond couldn't catch. His fingers twitched, as if holding on to a memory too heavy to carry. Raymond said nothing. Some truths needed warmth before they could be spoken. When they reached the police station, the lot was empty. The lights from inside flickered, yellow and tired. Raymond parked behind the building and cut the engine. For a long moment, he didn't move. He sat there, hands on the steering wheel, watching the steam rise from Max's breath. In the reflection of the windshield, he saw his badge gleaming under the dashboard light. It looked heavier than ever, as if the storm outside had pressed its weight upon it. He remembered Stanton's smirk, the trash on the snow, Evan's broken whisper. "I saw what they did." Raymond stepped out, opened the passenger door, and lifted Evan again. The man was lighter than he should have been, all bone and regret. Max followed close, brushing against Raymond's leg as they crossed the lot. Snowflakes clung to the brim of his coat and the fur around the dog's muzzle. The door to the station creaked open, spilling weak yellow light into the storm. Raymond paused at the threshold, looking once more over his shoulder. Out there, beyond the blur of snow and shadow, something moved. Too still, too deliberate. A pair of faint headlights blinked once, then vanished. He felt Max stiffen beside him. "Easy, boy," Raymond murmured, though his own voice wasn't steady. They stepped inside. The heat hit like a sigh. but the chill stayed with him. As the door closed, the last thing Raymond heard was the wind clawing against the walls, as if begging to be let in. He lowered Evan onto the bench near the heater, peeled off his gloves, and looked down at his friend. This soldier who once stood tall beside him, now broken by something far crueler than war. He didn't yet know what the man had seen, or how deep Stanton's shadow ran. But he knew one thing. Red Hollow's peace was built on silence, and tonight, that silence had cracked. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one rising within, and somewhere beyond the snowfall, a shadow watched them leave. The station door swung shut behind them with a hollow thud that seemed to echo longer than it should have. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and dust, a scent that had seeped into every file, every uniform, every sleepless night spent inside these walls. Raymond carried Evan past the rows of empty desks, his boots leaving dark prints across the linoleum floor. The overhead lights flickered unevenly, painting the walls in a pale yellow that made even the clean parts of the room look tired. Only one other soul remained awake at this hour, the station's night physician, Dr. Martha Keller. She appeared from the infirmary in a white wool cardigan and worn jeans tucked into heavy boots. In her mid-40s, Martha had the calm, sharp-eyed composure of someone who had seen worse and learned to survive it. Her dark hair was tied back hastily, and the stethoscope around her neck swung like a pendulum as she moved. "Put him here," she said, voice low but firm, gesturing toward the metal cot under the heater. Raymond obeyed without a word, lowering Evan's limp body onto the thin mattress. Martha worked fast. She peeled away the frozen layers of Evan's jacket, her hands steady even as his skin showed bruises that had no business being there. She checked his pulse, temperature, and pupils. "Severe hypothermia," she muttered, more to herself than to Raymond. "But these marks, someone roughed him up before the cold did." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't ask questions yet. Instead, she wrapped heated blankets around Evan, slipped a thermometer beneath his tongue, and attached a monitor that beeped weakly, as if hesitant to believe he was still alive. Max sat by the door, watching silently, tail motionless. Every now and then, the dog's head turned toward the frosted window, ears twitching at the faint whistle of wind beyond the glass. Raymond knew that sound well. The storm hadn't eased. It had only learned to whisper. He rubbed his temples, exhaustion sinking into his bones, and turned toward the coffee pot on the side table. It was half full, burnt from hours of neglect, but he poured himself a cup anyway. Martha looked up briefly. "You found him like this?" Raymond nodded. "Under the lamppost on Birch Road." She frowned, hands still moving. "Birch Road? That's industrial property. Who the hell wanders there at night?" Raymond didn't answer. His mind replayed Stanton's smile, the way the man's words had cut through the snow like a blade hidden in velvet. He forced his thoughts aside, focusing instead on the rhythmic rise and fall of Evan's chest. Slowly, the color returned to the man's face, pale but human again. After an hour, Martha pulled the blanket up to Evan's shoulders and sighed. "He'll make it through the night, but he needs rest. And food that isn't from a dumpster." She glanced at Raymond. "Who is he to you?" "A friend," Raymond said simply, the word tasting heavier than it should. Martha studied him a moment longer, as if reading the rest of the sentence he hadn't said. Then she nodded, wiped her hands, and handed him a clipboard. "I'll file a medical report. But Cole..." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "If this man's trouble runs deep, don't bring it here. You know how things work in this town." Raymond looked at her, weary but unflinching. "Maybe that's the problem, Doc. Everyone knows." For a brief moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the wind pressing against the window like something alive. Martha turned away first, muttering something about preparing saline drips. Raymond took it as his cue to leave. He stepped into his office. The light buzzed overhead, pale and indifferent. The room hadn't changed in years. The same wooden desk, the same metal filing cabinet, the same framed photo of his old unit before time and loss had separated them all. Evan's name was there once, in that photo, smiling, hand on Raymond's shoulder. Now that same hand trembled under hospital blankets 2 rooms away. He sat down, the chair creaking beneath him, and woke the old desktop computer. The screen flickered blue, then bled into gray as the database loaded. He typed in Evan Grant. No results. He tried again, slower. Nothing. The man had served with the 103rd Infantry Division. There should have been records, a VA report, at least something from discharge. But the system returned blank pages and a single line of text. Access restricted. Federal clearance required. Raymond frowned. He typed again, this time searching for the Rebuild Hope Foundation, the name Evan had gasped between shivers earlier. The moment he hit Enter, the monitor froze, the cursor blinking twice before a new window appeared. Data protected under federal seal. Authorization Level 4. Then the screen went black. He sat back, rubbing his jaw, the hum of the radiator filling the silence. Level 4 clearance meant national interest, not small-town charity work. Someone had sealed this tight for a reason, and if Stanton was involved, the reason was rot. Max, still at the doorway, watched him with unblinking patience. The dog tilted his head as if asking what came next. Raymond let out a slow breath. "You ever get the feeling, Max," he murmured, "that people don't sleep here? They just pretend they're dreaming." The dog blinked once, then lowered his head onto his paws, as if agreeing. Outside, the snow tapped softly against the windows, steady, rhythmic, almost like fingers. Raymond turned toward the sound. The street beyond the glass was empty, but for a moment he thought he saw something move between the parked cars. A trick of light, perhaps. Or maybe not. He stood, walked to the window, and peered out. Nothing but white. Yet the feeling stayed, the sense of being watched. He let the blinds fall back into place and turned off the lamp. In the half-dark, the office seemed smaller, the shadows heavier. He sat again and reached for his notepad. On it, he wrote 3 names in heavy pencil. Travis Stanton, Rebuild Hope Foundation, Evan Grant. Beneath them, he drew a thin line connecting the first 2, then paused. His hand hovered before adding a 3rd line that linked them all. The meaning wasn't clear yet, but he could feel it forming, like a bruise spreading beneath the skin. The clock struck 4. Dawn was still hours away, but the sky outside had begun to pale into that ghostly pre-morning blue that turns every shape into a shadow. Raymond leaned back, exhaustion washing over him. He heard the soft thump of Max's tail, steady and reassuring. The one sound that still felt honest in this town. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the wind slip through the cracks in the window frame. It sounded like words, carried too far to understand. Maybe it was memory, or guilt, or warning. It didn't matter. What mattered was that somewhere in Red Hollow, Beneath all its polite smiles and lit-up windows, something was rotting. And now, because of one broken soldier and one foolish act of decency, Raymond had stepped into it. When dawn came, the storm outside finally broke. Light spilled through the blinds, harsh and pale. The snow had stopped, but the silence that remained felt heavier than before. Red Hollow hadn't gone to sleep. It had simply decided not to wake. By morning, Raymond had traced one of the missing shipments listed under Rebuild Hope to a warehouse registered under Stanton Holdings. The snow had slowed, but the world still looked blurred, like the town itself was pretending not to see. He'd slept no more than an hour, yet his mind felt sharp with the kind of exhaustion that burns clean. The engine hummed like a heartbeat against the cold, and through the windshield, the world narrowed into a single road that led to Stanton Medical Storage. By midday, Raymond stood before the rusted chain-link gates. Clouds hung low, pressing over Red Hollow like a lid on something that shouldn't breathe. The sign above the entrance read in faded red letters, "Authorized personnel only." Yet the padlock hung open, the gate slightly ajar, as if the place itself was daring someone to ask why. He rested a hand on Max's head. The German shepherd stood rigid beside him, fur bristling along the spine, eyes fixed on the dim doorway ahead. Snowflakes clung to his sable and black coat, melting into streaks that glistened like scars earned in silence. Raymond's breath steamed in the air as he murmured, "Stay close, boy." Max gave a low grunt of acknowledgement. Together they stepped inside. Every sound in the place seemed amplified, the squeak of boots on concrete, the drip of condensation from a broken pipe, the faint hum of a freezer that shouldn't have still been running. A flickering light above threw moving shadows across the wall, and for a moment, they looked like people. He paused, heart steady but alert, the kind of alertness only soldiers remember after too many years of quiet fronts. Max's growl was low, warning, and it echoed in his chest, like the echo of an old command. "Don't look away." The interior smelled of ammonia, metal, and something sourer, like fear preserved in cold air. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering at odd intervals, throwing the long corridor into brief seizures of shadow. Rows of shelves stretched deep into the darkness, each stacked with identical white boxes labeled Medical Relief, Stanton Holdings. Some were torn open, revealing glass vials and rubber tubing that had no business being there. Max's low growl rippled again, guiding Raymond's steps. The dog's instincts had never failed him. In Afghanistan, Max had once frozen moments before an ambush, saving 3 men from a tripwire. That same instinct now led him toward a half-open metal door at the far end of the hall. Raymond followed, his boots echoing like the heartbeat of a man who already knew he'd gone too far. Inside the small office beyond, the air grew colder. A steel desk stood crooked under a single light. Papers littered the surface, shipment invoices, export manifests, and delivery records, bearing signatures that looked too perfect to be real. Raymond ran his gloved finger across one sheet. Medical supplies, shelter distribution. The date had been altered with correction, fluid. The signature below, Travis Stanton's, had been traced over twice. He glanced around. File cabinets stood open, their drawers empty except for shredded forms. A half-drained coffee cup sat by the window, its surface frozen over, forgotten mid-shift. Someone had left in a hurry. Then Max stopped moving. His ears shot forward, a growl deepening in his chest. Raymond followed the dog's gaze toward a vent panel near the floor, its screws hastily replaced, metal bent from the inside. He crouched, pried it open with his pocket knife, and shone his flashlight inside. The beam cut through the darkness and found what should never exist in any building that called itself charitable. A narrow crawl space stretched into the wall, lined with small cages, rusted, stained, the kind made for containment, not rescue. The concrete floor beneath was blotched with old, dark marks, things no one wanted to name. He shone the beam deeper into the crawl space. Rust flakes drifted down like dust motes, and the smell of bleach couldn't mask the metallic tang underneath. Raymond felt the air shift, cold, stale, and heavy with something human. He'd seen death before, but never packaged like this, never behind charity's mask. For a second, Afghanistan came back to him. The sound of a door creaking open, the same silence before horror made itself known. He steadied his breath, not from fear, but from rage quietly folding in on itself. Inside one of the cages, a torn hospital wristband hung from a wire latch. The faded name was still legible: Marlene K. The sight hit him like a ghost. He remembered the sealed file from months ago, the missing foster worker who vanished under Rebuild Hope's list. So that's where she went. He stepped back, shutting the vent quietly, as if silence could bury what he'd seen. Max pressed closer to his leg, ears flat, tail low, a quiet whine escaping him. Raymond placed a steadying hand on the dog's head, whispering, "Easy, we're not done yet." On the desk, a stack of photographs caught the light. He picked them up one by one. They showed young women in silver gowns smiling at a gala, the kind of image plastered across magazines under headlines about charity and hope. Yet under the glitter and pearls, faint bruises marked their wrists, subtle but undeniable. Behind them stood men in suits, each lapel pinned with a silver crest, the emblem of Stanton Holdings. The photos glowed under the weak light, silver gowns shimmering like hope frozen mid-frame. Yet the bruises told another story, a language written on skin, not smiles. Each face looked like a prayer no one answered. Raymond's jaw clenched. Even beauty, he realized, could become a weapon when wielded by those who owned mercy itself. Raymond laid the photos down, heart pounding not with fear, but with a cold fury that only truth could ignite. Every instinct screamed to storm the Stanton mansion, to drag the truth into daylight. But he'd been a soldier long enough to know vengeance shouted too loud, and justice required silence. For now, he needed evidence, and time was already thinning like ice underfoot. He turned to leave, gathering a few documents into his jacket pocket. As he crossed the threshold, Max suddenly stiffened again, head snapping toward the high windows. The dog's eyes followed something invisible, some flicker beyond the glass. Raymond stepped outside, the afternoon light blinding for a moment. Snow beginning to fall again, soft and gray like ash drifting from an unseen fire. He stood in the open yard, looking across the road. The world felt quieter than it should, like it was holding its breath. Then he saw it, a faint red glint, no bigger than a fingernail, reflecting off the snowbank opposite the gate. A camera lens, hidden but alive. He didn't move. The lens blinked again, patient, unhurried, like it had all the time in the world. Snow gathered on his shoulders, melting slowly into the collar of his coat. Somewhere in that quiet, Raymond understood. He wasn't just uncovering corruption. He'd just stepped into its sightline. And in Red Hollow, being seen was sometimes the same as being marked. Raymond's voice came out low, barely more than a breath. "This isn't mercy, boy," he murmured, eyes fixed on that cold red light. "It's a masquerade." The snow fell harder, erasing footprints as fast as they were made. Raymond turned away from the gate, Max at his side, both disappearing into the white curtain that swallowed Red Hollow whole. Behind them, the camera's tiny red eye kept glowing, steady, patient, and unblinking. Someone had seen him, and whoever it was, they were already one step ahead. The snow had not stopped, only softened, falling in lazy spirals that clung to the black iron gates of Stanton Estate. From afar, the mansion glowed like a cathedral of glass, its windows breathing golden light into the night while the rest of Red Hollow froze in silence. Cars with tinted windows glided up the curved driveway, engines humming like restrained secrets. The air smelled of perfume, power, and old money. Raymond stood among the shadows near the entrance, his breath pale against the cold. Gone was the uniform. In its place, a black suit and dark tie, the attire of someone who belonged here, or at least looked like it. Beneath the coat, his badge pressed lightly against his ribs, a ghost of duty he no longer trusted. From across the lot, Max waited in the dark by the service door, his silhouette steady against the frost. The German shepherd's amber eyes glinted each time headlights swept past. Patient, disciplined, knowing his cue would come. The front doors opened with a burst of heat and laughter. A butler, tall and narrow like a shadow stretched too long, took coats and names with mechanical precision. Inside, the chandeliers burned with light enough to shame the stars. The marble floor shone like ice under the guests' polished shoes. Women wore silver gowns that whispered when they moved. Men in tailored suits spoke in laughter pitched just high enough to drown out conscience. At the center of it all stood Travis Stanton, in a tuxedo as immaculate as his reputation. Mid-40s, with hair combed back to disguise the streaks of gray, he carried himself like a man who had never been told no. His smile was polished, his eyes empty. Each time he raised a glass, the crowd followed, and the illusion of charity swelled louder than the music itself. Raymond drifted through the crowd unnoticed. Another face, another uniform. He nodded politely to strangers, murmured false greetings, studied the exits, the cameras, the servers who moved like clockwork. Beneath the floorboards, another story unfolded. Down in the servant corridors, Evan moved like a ghost. The flicker of a single bulb painted his path in fragments of gold and shadow. He wore a waiter's uniform borrowed from a laundromat delivery truck, sleeves too short, collar frayed. Sweat beaded on his brow despite the cold. His hands trembled not from fear, but from the fragile clarity that comes when a man has nothing left to lose. He turned down a narrow hall that smelled faintly of bleach and wine. A locked door stood ahead, marked storage. The keycard in his pocket, stolen from a careless guard, beeped green. The door opened into a place that didn't belong beneath a mansion built for mercy. Rows of monitors lined the wall, each flickering with hidden camera feeds. Bedrooms, dressing rooms, the ballroom above. Cables slithered across the floor like veins. A second door stood ajar, light spilling out, and from within came the softest sob, a sound too small for such a large room. Evan stepped inside. The room was bare except for a single mattress and a girl sitting on it, knees drawn tight to her chest. She couldn't have been more than 15, her hair tangled, her wrists marked with faint bruises. When she looked up, her eyes held no reflection. "You're safe," Evan whispered, though the words sounded hollow in the air. She shook her head slowly, voice trembling. "No one's safe here. The sheriff brings us." Evan froze. "The sheriff?" Her lips quivered as she said it again, softer this time. "Reeves, He delivers the new girls. The name fell between them like a dropped blade. Evan's pulse thudded in his ears. He glanced back toward the hall. Footsteps echoed faintly overhead, muted by layers of wealth. He crouched beside her, his voice calm but taut. "I'll get you out. Stay quiet until you hear the dog. He'll come with the man I trust." Above them, the orchestra swelled. Violins sang over the laughter of the powerful. In the grand ballroom, Travis Stanton stood beneath the chandelier, a glass of champagne in hand. "To charity," he declared, smiling as the crowd lifted their drinks. "To the hearts that give when others cannot." The guests applauded. Cameras flashed. Behind him, the banner of Rebuild Hope Foundation rippled in the warm air. Raymond, standing near the balcony, watched from a distance. His jaw tightened. He had seen soldiers toast to victory before, always too soon, always before the bodies were counted. He felt the weight of the small camera card in his pocket, cold as guilt, waiting for its moment to matter. A sudden vibration against his wrist. His hidden earpiece crackled. Evan's whisper came through, low and urgent. "Basement, cameras, and a girl. Reeves is involved." Raymond's stomach turned. The sheriff. The man who once called him brother in arms, who swore to keep Red Hollow safe. He scanned the crowd. No sign of Reeves yet, but he could feel the shift in the air. The lie was beginning to sweat. He moved toward the rear staircase, blending into a group of guests headed for the smoking lounge. The air grew colder as he descended, the music above muffled by the marble and distance. The basement corridor stretched ahead, dimly lit, humming with unseen electricity. Max's faint growl echoed through the earpiece, the signal that he was near. When Raymond reached the bottom of the stairs, Evan emerged from the side hall, pale and shaking but alive. The girl was gone, hidden, he hoped, among the laundry carts. Their eyes met briefly. No words were needed. Then the sound came, a low hum spreading through the walls, like the mansion itself had begun to breathe. The alarm started, soft at first, then rising, layer by layer, until they became a chorus of mechanical panic. Lights flashed red along the ceiling. Voices shouted above. Orders barked, heels striking marble. "Go!" Raymond hissed. Max appeared at the corridor's end, tail low, eyes burning bright. The dog turned toward the service door, barking once, sharp, commanding. They ran. Evan's limp slowed him, but Raymond gripped his arm, pulling him through the door as gunmetal air met their faces. Snow lashed sideways. They stumbled into the night. The estate behind them burned with light and chaos, the music now replaced by sirens and shouts. Max led them down the hill toward the forest line, paws slicing through the drifts with soldier's precision. In Raymond's coat pocket, the stolen memory cards thudded against his chest, each one carrying a piece of the truth that could set Red Hollow on fire. When they finally reached the road, the sound of engines swelled behind them, vehicles giving chase, tires screaming over snow. Raymond turned once, just long enough to see the mansion glowing in the distance like a wounded cathedral, glass shattered, light bleeding into the storm. They kept moving. The night had no mercy left, only purpose. Inside the mansion, amid the flashing red alarms, a single monitor still functioned in the surveillance room. On its screen, the fleeing figures of Raymond, Evan, and Max moved through the snow. A faint chuckle rose from the shadows beside the console. A hand, gloved, deliberate, reached forward and pressed a button. The red recording light blinked once, steady and unblinking. Someone was watching and smiling. The dawn came bruised and colorless, light bleeding through a curtain of ash and snow. The road to Mill Creek was nothing but a ribbon of frost curling through the hills. Raymond drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other pressed to the inside pocket, where the stolen memory drives thudded like restless hearts. Evan sat beside him, hollow-eyed, wrapped in a coat that wasn't his. Max lay in the back seat, head resting on a torn blanket, ears twitching with every distant sound. The world outside looked frozen, but something beneath it was burning. The attack came without warning. A black SUV shot out from the bend ahead, engine roaring like an animal unchained. The impact was brutal, a sound of metal meeting purpose. Glass shattered, tires screamed, and the car spun until the trees stopped it. The world folded into flame and silence. Raymond's vision blurred, the smell of gasoline thick in his lungs. Before he could move, he felt teeth grip the fabric of his jacket. Max, growling, dragging him out through the shattered window, snow and sparks blurring together in a single violent mercy. Evan stumbled free on the other side, blood streaking his temple, eyes wide in disbelief. The SUV's doors opened. Two men stepped out, faces hidden by black masks, guns drawn, bullets tore through the smoke. Max darted sideways, barking once, a sound sharp enough to cut the chaos. Raymond fired from the ground, one clean shot. A man dropped. The other fled, vanishing into the tree line. Then the SUV's fuel tank ignited, painting the morning sky orange. They ran until the forest swallowed them. The air burned cold, stinging every wound. Max led the way, following scents older than roads. Hours passed before they reached an abandoned logging barn, its roof sagging under snow, its windows broken, eyes staring into the storm. Inside, the air smelled of pine sap and rust. Raymond shut the door, sealing them in with their breath and their ghosts. Firelight flickered across their faces, making them look older, harder, almost mythic. Evan sat against the wall, shivering, his hands trembling as he held the stolen drives. "Do you think it's all there?" he whispered. Raymond didn't answer. He opened the laptop, the cracked screen coming to life with the hum of truth. File after file unfolded. Contracts signed in quiet rooms, offshore accounts under false charities, footage from hidden cameras, the kind no one was meant to see. Girls led through sterile corridors, names logged beside medical symbols. Every folder bore the same mark: Stanton Holdings. Every transaction bore the same signature: Harold Reeves. The flames in the hearth danced across Raymond's face, revealing the war returning to his eyes, the one he thought he left overseas. Evan's voice broke the silence, raw and shaking. They called it rebuilding hope, but they were selling it. The words cracked open something inside him, and the frost on his gloves fell away as his hands clenched. He looked at Raymond, waiting for anger or pity. Instead, the old soldier's voice came soft but certain. "Then we take it back." Outside, the snow deepened into a hush that felt almost sacred, but Max's growl warned otherwise. He stood near the door, tail stiff, eyes fixed on the ridge beyond the trees. Somewhere out there, engines hummed again. The storm was closing in, and it carried the scent of pursuit. By dusk, they were moving again, following a trail Raymond had pieced together from the files. Coordinates buried in metadata pointed north, to an old facility once owned by Stanton Industries, now marked as decommissioned medical storage. The map called it Site 9. The snow called it something else, a grave no one tended. The journey took hours through drifts knee-deep and air so cold it silenced thought. Evan's limp worsened, his breath rasping like broken glass. Raymond walked ahead, cutting the path. Max beside him, their silhouettes small against the endless white. At last, a shape appeared through the fog, a squat concrete structure half buried under ice, its walls streaked with time and sin. They forced the rusted door open. The hinges screamed. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered weakly to life, revealing corridors painted with peeling gray. A chill not born of winter clung to the walls. And then they saw it. Rows of cages, metal tables lined with restraints, a whiteboard filled with names, each marked transfer pending. The air smelled of bleach, iron, and fear. Evan staggered forward, hand covering his mouth. "My God," he whispered. "This isn't a shelter. It's a harvest." Movement at the far end of the hall. Two figures stepping from the shadows. Reeves stood first, uniform still polished, badge glinting beneath the sterile light. Next to him, Travis Stanton, immaculate even here, his suit dusted with frost, his composure unbroken. "You should have stayed blind," Stanton said, voice calm as ice. "Red Hollow sleeps better that way." Raymond raised his gun, but his heart cracked at the sight of Reeves, the man who once called him brother. "You were supposed to protect them." Reeves's smile barely moved. "I did. I protected the town from knowing what feeds it." For a moment, the silence between them was heavier than the storm outside. Then, a gun clicked somewhere behind the cages. The captives began to stir, eyes wide, chains clinking like distant wind chimes. Max barked once, sharp, decisive, and the world erupted. Gunfire shattered the stale air. Evan dove for cover, firing back with precision born from fury. Raymond moved through the smoke, calm in the chaos, every motion guided by years of memory. Reeves fired first. The bullet tore through Raymond's coat. Max lunged, knocking the sheriff off balance, teeth clamped on the arm that held the weapon. The struggle was fast, brutal, silent except for the growl that carried all the rage of every caged soul in that room. Evan's shot came next, a clean, merciful end. Reeves fell without a word. Across the room, Stanton turned, panic breaking his perfect mask. He bolted for the exit, disappearing into the storm that waited like an accomplice. Raymond started after him, but Max barked twice, urgent, drawing his attention back to the cages. The women inside were sobbing now, reaching through the bars, the sound raw with disbelief that someone had finally come. Raymond lowered his weapon. The battle had ended, but the war still breathed in the room's silence. Evan collapsed against the wall, hands trembling, face streaked with tears and soot. Max stood between them, chest heaving, fur matted with blood that wasn't his. The old soldier looked around, the ruin of mercy built from lies, and felt the weight of every choice that led here. He knelt beside Max, hand on the dog's neck, voice low. "You did good, boy." The shepherd's tail flicked once, slow, steady, like the heartbeat of something still alive in all this ruin. Outside, the storm raged, wind howling through broken glass, and when the final door slammed behind them, what filled the silence wasn't peace. It was something deeper, something that waited between guilt and grace. The kind of silence that always comes before redemption. The sirens came not as a warning, but as an ending. By dawn, the valley below Mill Creek burned with 1,000 beams of white. FBI trucks carved their way through the frost, their headlights cutting the morning haze into ribbons. Agents moved with quiet efficiency, voices muffled under the rhythm of radios and the crunch of boots on snow. From the hill above the site, Raymond watched it all unfold. The flashing blue lights, the blankets draped around shivering women, the slow, careful rebirth of justice. Max stood beside him, fur silvered with frost, tail still, eyes fixed on the movement below. The shepherd had fought his wars. Now, he simply watched the world being made right again. Evan stood near one of the vehicles, wrapped in a gray thermal blanket, speaking to an agent who scribbled notes faster than his hand could keep up. His face was pale, a healing scar tracing his temple like an unfinished story. When his gaze found Raymond on the ridge, he didn't wave, didn't smile, just nodded once. It was the kind of nod that meant we made it out alive, but not untouched. The wind tugged at their clothes, carrying with it the distant sound of weeping and relief, the soft collapse of fear turning to freedom. A woman with auburn hair, the lead agent, gave orders near the entrance of the facility. Her voice was brisk, but not cold. Get every one of them medical care first. No interviews until after sunrise. Around her, paramedics moved with quiet grace, wrapping the rescued women in emergency blankets that shimmered gold against the snow. Some of the women cried. Others just stared, lips parted as if the world had grown too wide again. One clung to a St. Christopher pendant, its silver catching the first honest light of day. Raymond's breath misted in the cold. He felt no triumph, only an ache where exhaustion lived. The light below was too bright for the sins it revealed. And yet, it was all they had left to call mercy. He placed a hand on Max's neck. We did what we could, he murmured, not sure if he was speaking to himself or to the ghosts they'd left buried under the ice. Weeks slipped by like slow melting snow. The headlines came first. Red Hollow charity scandal exposed. Missing women found in secret lab. Sheriff's death under investigation. Then came the investigations, the trials, the televised apologies. Red Hollow, once a town built on whispers, became a town rebuilt on truth. The banners that once read "Rebuild Hope" were replaced with simpler words, painted on the community center's door. No one left behind. Raymond never spoke to the cameras. He left that to Evan. The younger veteran had healed faster than expected, physically at least. When the winter broke into spring, Evan helped open a new shelter near the outskirts of town. It bore no logo, no donations, no speeches, just a wooden sign burned by hand. The Lantern House. At the opening, Evan had stood under the soft rain, surrounded by volunteers, and said only one sentence. This time, hope stays. Max, became a name known beyond Red Hollow. The department called it the Medal of Valor, though Raymond thought the medal was more for the people who needed something to believe in than for the dog himself. At the ceremony, Max wore a simple leather collar, no polish, no shine. When the mayor pinned the medal to Raymond's jacket, Max leaned against his leg as if reminding him that none of it mattered as much as being here, breathing. The applause rolled like thunder through the town square, but the sound that stayed with Raymond was Max's steady heartbeat, thudding softly against his side. And then, life found its rhythm again. The days stretched longer, the nights warmer. The ice on the river broke, leaving ripples that carried sunlight like liquid gold. Raymond's house stood quiet on the edge of town, its porch creaking with familiar comfort. Most mornings, he and Max walked across the old bridge, the same one where the river once froze over the night everything began. The smell of thawing earth and pine needles filled the air. The world no longer looked like a wound. Sometimes she was there, the journalist, Emily Rhodes, The woman who'd turned their story into words the world could finally bear. Late 30s, with kind eyes and a face that seemed perpetually half-lit by curiosity, she often came carrying her leather notebook and a thermos that smelled of coffee and cinnamon. She would wave from the railing, her voice soft over the hum of water. "You walk this bridge every day, don't you?" "Old habits die slower than old ghosts," Raymond would reply, his voice carrying that worn-out calm only soldiers and widowers seem to understand. Once, as the river reflected the first blush of sunrise, she had asked the question he'd known was coming. "Do you ever wish you hadn't seen that night?" The pause that followed was not hesitation, it was memory. The snowstorm, the screams, the firelight shaking against the dark, all of it lived behind his eyes. He turned to her and smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held both pain and peace. "If we hadn't," he said, "no one else would have." Emily wrote it down, slowly, as if afraid of breaking the weight in his tone. Later, that sentence would close her article. The Winter Veil, the story that turned Red Hollow from a crime scene into a lesson in courage. But in that moment, under the dawn, it was just two people standing between what was lost and what had been found. As they spoke, Max waded into the shallow edge of the river, tail slicing through the water. He barked once, a low sound that echoed like laughter. Raymond bent to throw a stick, watching as it skimmed across the current before the shepherd leapt after it. The splash glittered under the light, scattering 1,000 shards of morning into the air. The town behind them stirred awake. Somewhere church bells rang. The bakery on Main Street opened its doors, releasing the smell of bread and cinnamon. For the first time in years, Red Hollow didn't feel like a place haunted by what it hid, but a place healing from what it chose to reveal. Raymond slipped his hands into his coat pockets, watching Max return with the stick, fur glistening gold under the new sun. The veteran's shoulders eased. The scars on his hands caught the light, but for once they didn't look like reminders of pain. They looked like proof of survival. The wind rose, carrying the scent of pine and thawing earth. Raymond turned his face toward it, breathing deeply. Max pressed closer, tail brushing against his leg. The snow that lingered on the banks shimmered softly in the dawn, no longer white but gold, like forgiveness given form. And for the first time since the storm began, Red Hollow felt forgiven. In the frozen town of Red Hollow, a veteran, a wounded soldier, and a loyal dog uncovered a truth buried beneath the snow. A truth that turned silence into justice. They didn't fight for glory. They fought because someone had to. And when the light finally broke through, it wasn't just the town that was saved. It was faith itself. In every corner of the world, there are people and animals who give more than they take, who stay behind to hold the line when the noise fades. They won't ask for recognition. They won't tell their stories. But if you look closely, you can see them in the way light falls on a worn bridge, or in the gentle press of a loyal companion's paw. Loyalty, kindness, mercy. These are not grand words. They're quiet ones, whispered in the spaces between loss and forgiveness. And maybe that's why they last. So if you ever find yourself in a place that feels too cold, too silent, too far gone, remember this. There are still hearts that keep the fire, still hands that lift what's fallen, still souls that believe the world is worth saving, one small act of grace at a time. If stories like this remind you that kindness still matters, that courage can still be gentle, stay with us, subscribe, and walk with us through the next story, where hope always finds its way home.